The United States government has been trying to eradicate this animal since 1974. In that time, the population has grown from 2 million to 9 million across 38 states. The USDA now officially considers nationwide eradication impossible. The animal responsible carries 30 diseases, outwits every trap humans have built, and is teaching its offspring everything it knows. The feral hog didn't win because it's the strongest animal in North America. It won because it's one of the smartest. The government didn't just fail to stop them. It accidentally funded a 50-year, multi-million-dollar research program to build a better hog. Every trap that didn't work was a lesson for the next generation. We've been running an involuntary PhD program in survival, and the pigs are graduating with honors while we're still stuck on the orientation phase. Today, we're going to talk about the feral hog, the animal that is winning a 50-year war against the most powerful government on earth, one county at a time, the one that is in your state right now, the one your tax dollars have been failing to stop since before most people reading this were born, and the one that just got a serious upgrade, crossing south from Canada with cold weather genetics that make everything the US has tried so far even less effective. This is not a story about a dangerous animal in some distant jungle. This is a story about what happens when an invasive species is smarter than the program designed to stop it, and what comes next when the problem doubles in size every 4 months. Let's start with the assumption most people make. When Americans hear feral hog, most of them picture something from the rural South. A nuisance, something farmers deal with, a hunting story, a pest problem that gets handled with a rifle and a weekend in Texas. That mental model is about 50 years out of date. In 1982, feral hogs were established in 18 states and 550 counties across the United States. By 2023, that number had reached 38 states and nearly 1,500 counties. Texas alone, one state, has 2.9 million feral hogs in 253 of its 254 counties. The one county without them is not doing anything clever. It just hasn't happened yet. The annual damage to U.S. agriculture, property, and natural resources now reaches $3.4 billion per year, according to a peer-reviewed study published in Pest Management Science in 2026. That number has roughly doubled from the figure that was being cited 5 years ago, not because the methodology changed, but because the problem grew. $3.4 billion every year, ongoing and climbing. This is not a pest problem. This is an occupation. The image of a weekend hunter with a rifle in Texas is a joke compared to the scale of what's happening. An invasive force that has taken 253 out of 254 counties in one state. The last county isn't holding out because of superior strategy. It's just next on the schedule. This isn't pest control anymore. It's a full-scale territorial takeover, and the hogs are winning one county at a time. Now, let's look at what you're actually dealing with. The average adult male feral hog in the United States weighs between 150 and 220 pounds, 68 to 100 kilograms. That is roughly the size of a large man. But the comparison ends there, because what it does with that mass is nothing like what a man does. It runs at 30 miles per hour, 48 kilometers per hour, through terrain that would require a human to slow down and navigate. Brush, undergrowth, creek beds. The hog goes through, not around. Its low center of gravity, wedge-shaped skull, and dense musculature make it a biological battering ram that doesn't recognize obstacles the way you do. It doesn't navigate obstacles. It deletes them. With a wedge-shaped skull and a center of gravity that would make a sports car jealous, it goes through brush at 30 miles per hour like a freight train that doesn't need tracks. You aren't dealing with a pig. You're dealing with a low-profile demolition unit that doesn't believe in property lines. The tusks on an adult male grow continuously and self-sharpen. Upper and lower tusks work against each other like scissor blades every time the jaw opens and closes. A mature male carries tusks that can reach 7 to 9 inches, 18 to 23 centimeters. The lower pair are the primary weapons. They move upward and outward, not forward like a spear, but in a lateral slash that targets whatever is nearest at leg height. It's a self-honing scissor system that never needs a maintenance check. Every time the jaw opens, the blades sharpen themselves against each other, a biological paper shredder designed specifically for leg height targets. It doesn't spear you. It slashes laterally, turning a standard walk into a surgical emergency before you've even identified the source of the movement. And there is the cartilaginous shield. Unlike the European wild boar's well-documented calcon, the American feral hog carries a dense fibrous shoulder and neck pad that developed through generations of combat between males. It is not bone. It is thickened connective tissue that has stopped blades and reduced the effectiveness of certain projectiles at close range. It is not armor in the absolute sense, but it is the reason why superficial wounds on adult males often look like nothing happened. The senses. A feral hog can detect scent at a range of up to 7 miles, 11 kilometers, under favorable conditions. It can smell something buried 25 feet, 7.5 meters, underground. This is not metaphor. This is why pigs have been used for centuries to locate underground truffles. The same capability that finds fungus 3 feet underground finds your campsite, your bait station, and your trap from a distance that makes most approaches pointless. Its hearing is equally disproportionate. A feral hog can detect a human whisper at 100 yards, 90 meters. Not a voice, a whisper. A feral hog is basically a mobile wiretap. It can hear a whisper at 100 yards and smell a candy bar in your pocket from 7 miles away. You aren't sneaking up on a sounder. You're just providing them with high-resolution updates on your location and until they decide they've had enough of your presence. You are not approaching a feral hog without it knowing. The question is only what it decides to do with that information. Now here is where the story gets genuinely unsettling. The feral hog is not just an animal with good senses and useful hardware. It is among the most cognitively capable non-primate mammals on the continent. And the 50-year eradication campaign has been running an unintentional intelligence test on every population in the country. The animals that survived were the ones smart enough to recognize what was happening. Those animals reproduced. Their offspring inherited both the genetics and the learned behavior. We have been selectively breeding a smarter hog for 50 years. Here is what that looks like in practice. Set a cage trap in an area with established feral hogs. Within days, sometimes within hours, the sounder will approach the trap, investigate it, and leave without entering. They recognize it. They remember it. This specific trap in this specific location associated with this specific human scent pattern. Rangers and wildlife managers document cases where hogs return to a trap site repeatedly over months, sniff the perimeter, and walk away. The trap record stays in the group's collective awareness indefinitely. More than that, feral hogs have been documented freeing other pigs from closed cage traps. Problem-solving behavior. Direct manipulation of the mechanism. A pig on the outside working to release a pig on the inside. This is not instinct. This is the kind of behavior that gets attributed to primates and corvids in wildlife research papers. If your dog gets trapped, it barks. If a feral hog gets trapped, its companion on the outside analyzes the mechanism and tries to work the latch. Not instinct. Mission impossible with 100 kilograms of muscle. They don't just avoid traps, they memorize them, file them under human deception, and pass the curriculum down to their offspring. You aren't fighting an animal. You're fighting a collective memory. The social structure that makes this possible is the sounder. A sounder is a matriarchal group, typically 2 to 30 females and their young, all related, led by the eldest and most experienced female. She knows the territory. Every water source, every food supply, every escape route, every location where a trap was once placed. That knowledge doesn't die with her. It is passed down through the group. It is a curriculum. The U.S. government's eradication program cannot compete with a curriculum. When hunters shoot 2 or 3 animals from a sounder, the rest scatter. They don't just run, they disperse onto neighboring properties that have not been treated, break into smaller groups that are harder to locate and trap, and within days shift entirely to nocturnal activity. The nocturnal shift is nearly universal in populations under hunting pressure. Thermal imaging equipment helps, but helicopter operations at night over private land at scale are not operationally feasible across 38 states. The math is what makes this a genuine crisis. To hold a feral hog population stable, not reduce it, just stop it from growing, you must continuously remove 66 to 70% of the population throughout the year, every year, without stopping, on every affected property simultaneously. Current U.S. control methods across all programs combined achieve approximately 29% annual removal. You need 70%. You are achieving 29%, and the population can double in 4 months under ideal conditions. The USDA's own language, published in official program documentation, now reads, "Nationwide eradication is not practical and may be impossible." In any other organization, a 29% success rate when you need 70 would get the entire department restructured. But the hogs don't care about quarterly reports. They can double their population in 4 months while the government is still filing paperwork for the next aerial operation. Eradication isn't not practical. It's a lost war, and the USDA is just finally putting that in writing. That sentence was written by the agency that has spent 50 years and hundreds of millions of dollars on the problem. Read it again. Let's talk about what these animals actually do to the land. A single sounder, 15 to 20 animals, can plow up an acre of ground in one night. Not metaphorically. They root through the top 6 to 12 inches of soil searching for bulbs, roots, small vertebrates, ground-nesting bird eggs, anything with caloric content. What they leave behind looks like someone drove a rototiller through a field and then abandoned it. Over 300 native species are directly impacted by feral hog activity across the U.S. Loggerhead sea turtle nesting beaches in South Carolina have documented 0 successful nesting in areas with established feral hog populations. 0. The hogs locate and consume every nest. Ground nesting birds lose breeding seasons. Native plant communities are stripped before they can establish. Forests with feral pig populations show 26% lower mammal and bird diversity compared to forests without them. And the water. Feral hogs use mud as thermoregulation. They wallow, dozens of animals, repeatedly, in the same water source. The E. coli levels in watersheds with established feral hog populations run 40 times higher than in clean watersheds. 40 times. Those watersheds flow downstream into rivers, municipal water intake zones, agricultural irrigation systems. This is not a theoretical contamination risk. It is an active, documented, ongoing public health issue across every region where feral hogs are established. Now, the disease section. And this one requires you to pay attention. Feral hogs carry at least 30 bacterial and viral diseases and nearly 40 parasites. Several of these are directly transmissible to humans. Brucellosis, which causes chronic flu-like illness, arthritis, and can progress to meningitis, tests positive in 20 to 30% of feral hogs surveyed across the U.S. 20 to 30%. That is not a rare finding. That is every third or fourth animal. Leptospirosis, trichinellosis, pathogenic E. coli, hepatitis E, tularemia. The list is long, but none of it is the threat that keeps epidemiologists most concerned. Pigs are the only known mammalian species capable of being simultaneously infected with human influenza viruses and avian influenza viruses. The pig is nature's ultimate mixing chamber. The only mammal that can host human flu and avian flu at the same time, letting them swap genetic code like a biological dark web. This is how pandemics are born. The next global health crisis doesn't need a high-tech laboratory or a crowded city. It just needs a drainage ditch in Georgia and a hog with a high fever. Inside a single pig host, a human flu strain and an avian flu strain can exchange genetic material and produce an entirely new hybrid virus. This is called reassortment. It is the mechanism behind pandemic influenza strains. The 1918 flu, the 2009 H1N1 pandemic. Both were products of viral reassortment in swine hosts. In late 2024, the USDA confirmed the first detection of H5N1, the avian influenza strain currently circulating at high pathogenicity, in domestic swine in Oregon. 6 million to 9 million feral hogs roam across 38 states. They interact with domestic pig operations. They interact with wild bird populations. They interact with deer, raccoons, and every other species in their range. They are completely unmonitored. No surveillance system covers them. No vaccination program reaches them. They are, in the technical language of epidemiology, a mixing vessel operating at scale across millions of acres with no oversight. The next pandemic influenza strain does not have to come from a wet market in Southeast Asia. It could emerge from a drainage ditch in Georgia. And then there is African swine fever. African swine fever, ASF, has never been detected in the continental United States. It is currently active in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, approximately 700 miles from the Florida coast. An ongoing outbreak in the Caribbean as of late 2024. ASF does not infect humans, it infects pigs. 100% fatality rate in infected domestic swine. No vaccine, no treatment, no cure. A 2024 study in Frontiers in Veterinary Science models an ASF outbreak in the U.S. at $15 billion in losses over 2 years and $50 billion over 10 years. The U.S. swine industry generates $7.7 billion in annual pork exports. An ASF outbreak would effectively eliminate that industry for the duration of the outbreak, potentially permanently, given the challenge of containment. Here is the part that keeps USDA's Livestock Protection Division awake at night. With domestic herds, ASF can be contained. You quarantine farms, you cull infected animals, you restrict movement. It is brutal and expensive, but it has been done. In Asia, in Eastern Europe. The containment works because domestic herds are located on farms with addresses, under veterinary supervision, on land with fences. Feral hogs have no fences. They cross state lines. They swim channels up to 4 miles wide. They cannot be quarantined. If ASF reaches one feral hog sounder in the American South, it enters a permanent wild reservoir across 38 states that no eradication program can reach. Domestic herds would be reinfected repeatedly, indefinitely, from a source population that is functionally beyond control. The $50 billion exposure isn't sitting in a vault somewhere. It's sitting in the brush, sniffing the air, teaching its offspring the smell of a trap. Now, the escalation. In the 1980s, the Canadian government encouraged farmers to import Eurasian wild boar from Europe as livestock diversification, boutique meat, hunting ranches, a new revenue stream for prairie agriculture. For 2 decades, it worked reasonably well. Then, in 2001, the market collapsed. Wild boar meat wasn't profitable enough. Hunting ranch bookings fell off. Farmers who had invested in Eurasian boar found themselves holding animals they couldn't sell. Some cut fences. Some simply walked away from properties that had become economically unviable. The Eurasian boar interbred with escaped domestic pigs. The result was a hybrid, larger body than standard feral hogs from the Eurasian genetics. Cold weather adaptation. Following a biological principle called Bergmann's rule, animals at northern latitudes develop larger bodies and thicker coats. The hybrids do this. They tunnel under snow, lining the tunnels with cattail insulation, creating warm chambers that allow them to survive Canadian prairie winters that would kill a standard Texas feral hog outright. The standard feral hog cannot survive serious northern winters. That biological barrier, cold, was one of the few natural limits on northward expansion. The super pig, as it has come to be called, has removed that limit. This is the software upgrade nobody wanted. Eurasian genetics plus domestic size plus cold weather adaptation equals a version that builds insulated snow bunkers and survives Canadian prairie winters. The cold was the last line of defense. The line just dissolved. A cold weather-optimized unit moving south, specifically designed to tolerate the one weapon, winter, that we thought we still had. As of the most recent surveys, the super pig population covers approximately 300,000 square miles of Canadian prairie, primarily in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. The range is expanding by approximately 34,000 square miles per year. Aerial surveys have documented animals on both sides of the Canadian border with North Dakota. One sounder was photographed within 18 miles of Minnesota. Researchers at the University of Saskatchewan now describe eradication in Manitoba and Saskatchewan as no longer possible. The window closed. The only remaining strategy is early detection and rapid response along the U.S. border, trying to catch animals before they establish breeding populations south of the line. The species that the United States government has been unable to control for 50 years is receiving a cold weather upgrade from the north right now. Now, you, personally, in feral hog country. Feral hogs are not hunting you. This is important to understand. The 15% fatality rate in serious mauling encounters does not come from predatory behavior. It comes from defensive behavior, cornered animals, sows protecting piglets, wounded individuals. The hog that charges you is not planning a meal. It is removing a threat. This distinction matters for survival because the scenarios that produce encounters are almost always preventable. You are walking a trail in East Texas. Pre-dawn. August. You round a bend and find yourself 5 yards from a sow with piglets you did not see or hear. She has heard you for 30 seconds. You have just seen her. In the time it takes your brain to register what you're looking at and begin forming a response, she has already made her decision. There is no hospital 40 minutes away. There is a dirt road and a cell phone with one bar. The nearest emergency room is 50 miles from where you're standing. A tusk wound to the thigh is the scenario wildlife managers describe in incident reports. Femoral territory. The time from wound to incapacitation in an untreated severe leg laceration is not long enough to reach a road from most of the terrain where these encounters happen. At 5 yards, the assessment is over before you've reached for your phone. A tusk wound to the femoral artery is a geometry problem with a very short timeline. In the brush, help is a theoretical concept, and incapacitation is a 3-minute countdown. The hog isn't a monster. It's a superior survival system that has been stress tested by 50 years of our best efforts and came out stronger on the other side. Back away. Slowly. Put a tree between you and the animal if one is available. Do not run unless running puts you immediately behind solid cover. A vehicle, a structure, something the hog cannot simply go through. If you go down, protect your midsection and your throat. The hog is not trying to eat you. It is trying to neutralize a threat. Your job is to stop being a threat. Make noise when you walk in areas with established hog populations. Carry bear spray. It is effective. They have an extraordinary nose. Use it against them. The smell of approaching humans well in advance allows the sounder to move away. Most do. A hog that has chosen to avoid you is a hog that has already made the right call. The feral hog is not a monster. It is an extraordinarily capable animal placed in a situation it did not design. Imported, escaped, released, abandoned, hybridized, and multiplied across a continent that now has no effective answer to it. The intelligence that makes it nearly impossible to eradicate is the same intelligence that makes it fascinating. An animal that can memorize trap locations, teach its offspring to recognize government aerial operations, shift its entire behavioral schedule in response to hunting pressure, and develop cold weather survival strategies that expand its range into climates it was never designed for. That is not a nuisance species. That is something that has been stress tested by 50 years of the most sustained human control effort applied to any land animal in American history, and emerged not just surviving, but expanding. The federal government that declared nationwide eradication impossible did not make that statement lightly. They made it because the data left no other conclusion. The feral hog has won every battle so far. The next chapter depends on whether the right people pay attention to what's coming from the north. Respect the wild. And may the only feral hog you ever encounter be on a thermal camera feed. Small, distant, and moving away from the camera rather than toward it. That's the feral hog. If this gave you something, leave a like. It helps reach people who want to understand what's actually happening out there. Subscribe to The Wild Truth. New videos about real animals every week. And write in the comments, did you know the USDA officially considers eradication impossible? What do you think should happen next? I read all of them.